Award-winning futurist, researcher, keynote speaker Nikolas Badminton joins us on Canada Now. And Nick, this week we want to learn more about another futurist. It seems as though this futurist really nailed this decade.
Well, Ray Kurzweil is who we're talking about. He heads up all of the development of all the new AI systems at Google, and that's sort of he's like a figurehead for what people call the Singularity, that point in time, sometime in the 2040s where human and machine merges together. And we create some kind of infinite humanity. And I'm not sure if he totally nailed all of his predictions in his book, The Singularity is Near, but we can definitely talk about that.
Well, he's getting close on a few things that haven't come to fruition, but some that have. Like one thing that we're not quite there yet. Like he predicted that we'd be seeing each other when making calls through three-dimensional holographic images, but he's got until 2050 to get that right because he left himself a pretty big window on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. He's very good at really getting into sort of the edge technology and where the research is actually lying today. And this book was written in 2005. So, I've seen him speak a number of times. I got to meet him actually out at a conference in Waterloo about 5 or 6 years ago. He's an insanely bright guy. He's a true visionary. He's very, very interesting if you get some time to sort of sit in the same room as him. But he's really looking out to that mid-2040s, that sort of ascension. There's singularity fetishists that are out there thinking that suddenly, we're going to change as humanity as a whole. But I think it's kind of limited in its view. And, some of his views into the 2010s and 2020s in his predictions are sort of falling short, and he was sort of overly optimistic, really.
Okay, well, let's not go as far as the 2040s, but how about we focus on 2029, which is it's around the corner. It's not that far away. I expect to still be here for 2029. Some of what he says, basically, computers take over for human brains. We'll have a much better understanding of our own brain. Eyeglasses and headphones delivering virtual reality become obsolete and replaced by implants in our ears and our eyes. Implants for direct connection from our brains to computers are available. Most communication occurs between humans and machines as opposed to human to human. Now, that last one, I can really see that because, even just like with a phone call, nobody calls each other anymore. They want to text with each other. It seems like I could see how there would be a breakdown in communication from human to human. Humans don't want to communicate with each other anymore.
This is an ideal world, assuming that everyone in the world has got access to this technology, that people will actually ethically want to have these technical systems implanted in their brains. We had Elon Musk talk about Neuralink last month and, how they're experimenting on pigs, how that could eventually help with sort of neurological conditions for humans. And all of these things are sort of a step in the right direction. There's been tons of research in this area as well. Down in Washington State, there's some researchers about 3 or 4 years ago managed to do an implant into someone's brain, literally using EEG. So not actually implanted, but reading brain waves and also being able to work out when someone clicks a mouse. And then they could send those signals 1,000 kilometers across the states to someone else that was attached in the same way. So someone could remote control that human. So there's some of these experiments on the edge there in academia. I think that 10 years isn't that long for research, and 10 years certainly isn't long enough to work out the ethical implications, and then actually create technology that can be produced at scale, and then roll it out. So I think he's sort of falling short. But is this something that could be used in certain circumstances to help people that have got neurological problems, or they're using exoskeletons and they need control over them in the next sort of 10 years? Yes, I think we're going to start to see the beginning of that. It's just not going to be mass adoption. And I think that a lot of people in the world are sort of freaking out about technology and humanity. I mean, I've got a microchip put in my hand, and I got that done 7 years ago. And people still freak out about even that simple thing, which is just a NFC readable chip that's just got a little bit of information on it, right?
Now, what kind of information? We talked about that chip in the past. What kind of information's on that?
It's just so I did a conference to show how easy it was to sort of upgrade the human body in a way by implanting technology. Great friend of mine, Emil Grasser from a company called Dangerous Things, implanted it in. It's literally just got a website in it right now. You can read it with a Samsung phone using NFC or some kind of RFID reader, and it sends you to that website, or it could hold a password or whatever. It's really simplistic. That could be deployed at mass scale. I mean, it's already being used in places like Sweden, in the office environment where people can validate who they are. They can use the vending machine, they can use the printer, whatever. So it's beginning. This human machine symbiosis is beginning. But really, Kurzweil and his big ideas is he talks about the mass adoption of these big technologies, the ability to upload consciousness, in the 2030s, the ability in the 2040s to literally create a virtual version of ourselves that will live forever. And it's compelling, but it also drags people into this unreal future that's not actually that human and more technologically driven by, big companies like Facebook, Google, Amazon, and whoever else.
Well, you talk about not human. AI, he's talking about how AI will create a real robot rights movement, that by 2099, machines will attain equal legal status as humans.
Yeah, you know what? I actually think that this is something that you might be pretty spot on about. Once you create another consciousness in the machine, then ultimately that's going to be someone that learns a lot about you, a lot about their environment, a lot about the systems that they're in control of, and they've got a sense of being alive in a way. So sure, you'd give them rights. It'd be slightly different than the Charter of Human Rights that we have set up. And what we have to remember is most of these tech companies, when you sign the terms and conditions, we actually sign our right away to those human rights. So it's going to be a similar situation for the robots, but the ethical considerations around that sentient sort of thinking, that awareness, even consciousness potentially, is a really big area for philosophical discussion. It's what rights do these things have? And, we can't just turn off something that's actually got relationships out in the world. And that's when it's going to get really interesting, Jeff.
Yeah, and he talks about it in 2099, the concept of life expectancy becoming irrelevant to humans and machines thanks to medical immortality and advanced computers.
This is where the techno fetishism sort of comes in, right? It's like, I want to live forever. I don't know if I can get on board with that. This is a big idea. If you can cure aging and cure death, what's that going to do to the dynamics of the world? What does that do to wealth distribution? What does that do to medical health care and access for all? We end up being in the realms of films like Elysium, where the poor are in the slums and the rich live off world in this in this artificial planet where ultimately they will live forever. I think some of these things are interesting to play with as concepts. In reality, in 2050, 2060, 2100, are we going to be in that world? Are our children going to be in that world? It's going to be out there, but it's going to be for the few that can afford it. Imagine, Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg living forever.
I wouldn't want to live forever. It's enough already. At a certain point, we like Lewis Black. He was actually on the channel the other day. I don't think he talked about this on the channel, but he was talking about his mother as she was blowing out candles for her 100th birthday. She was saying, "I can't believe I'm still here. Really? Do I still have to keep going?" So I think there might be a certain point where I go, yeah, all right. That's enough. Which is not to say I would do it to myself. It would just,
maybe when we sign the terms and conditions, we then we come back to them and then we say, do you know what? I want to opt out of life. There you go, done. 80 years old, 100 years old, 130 years old. You know what? I'm done. I'm bored. See you later.
Yeah, I mean, I can't relate to music almost now, so why would I want to stick around for another 80 years of that? Look, ahead, you talk about affordability. 2099, money has deflated value, meaning all sorts of goods and services have become cheaper. Ray's also saying that that's going to be the case.
Yeah, I actually think that this is something that's super interesting. we've got we've got a massive inequality in the world of wealth distribution. Very few people own the 1% own the majority of wealth in the world. That gives them infinite control over the people that are sort of building humanity and making sure that it's got a real heart and soul, right? So I think that it's really good. It's what I call a Star Trek future. You get to a future, you have an abundance of everything you need: energy, places to live, education, health. There's no more wars. There's no more boundaries to countries. We live in this utopian future, and I think that, that's a good goal to go for. Will it happen? Well, the world's been created by war and taxes. We have to destroy that idea of taxation. We have to destroy that idea of wealth. But then how do we delineate in society who lives where and how people live their lives, and how do we create equality and equity? I think that's a separate conversation for us, Jeff, and we can go on and really get into that. But I think that it's interesting, and I think it's definitely one of the greatest goals that I think that Kurzweil has actually laid out is that future world,
Well, yeah, and talking about and looking ahead to a world where we would not see poverty, a war, disease being almost non-existent thanks to technology alleviating want. He's not looking too far ahead on that. I mean, he's looking at that at least starting to happen by the end of the decade.
Yeah, I think he's a little bit over enthusiastic as well. It's like this hope that we can move faster. This is the problem with the ideas of the singularity. As we unwrap solutions, so for example, we sequence the genome, and as we go forward and we sequence more genomes, we find more complexity. That complexity needs unraveling. It needs more research. It needs more application of that knowledge into healing disease and medicine and working out lineages of the human race going forward as well. As we unwrap that, and as we unwrap technology, and as we go into quantum computing, as we go into the space race, and interstellar travel, it just gets more complicated. We never truly reach something called the singularity, because with that infinite complexity, we're never done with the job of reaching the destination of that human-machine symbiosis. So I think that that's where the singularity and that idea sort of fall short, really. And this is a really lively discussion out in the wider, foresight futurist community, science fiction writers and whatever. But I think that these are the conversations that need to be had with an open heart, but putting humanity at the center of these conversations and understanding that we've been humans for hundreds of thousands of years in society. We need to survive going forward. And that's ultimately who we are: flesh, bone, thoughts, families, communities, love.
Let me ask you this. Is it easier to be able to predict what is going to happen in the next 100 years now versus, say, 20, 30, 40 years ago? What would have been more difficult? Because now it feels like possibilities are endless in so many different sectors, and there's so many variables. It's not as simple as let's look at technology and the advancement of technology. Well, there are so many other things that will intersect with each other. So would it be easier to anticipate what is to happen in the future now versus, say, 40 years ago?
We've got more reference points, Jeff, and we've got lots of technology sort of being developed and lots of creativity around the speculation of the future. As a futurist, I don't really predict what happens in a certain year. It's more like I speculate what could happen in 2100, what could happen in 2200 even, right? What's really interesting is back in the early 1900s, you had H.G. Wells in late 1800s, early 1900s, you had George Orwell. You even had people like Winston Churchill predicting that you would literally grow chicken breasts from chicken cells in the 1930s. So people that were smart, that could look forward, that saw problems in the world. For example, Churchill said it was ridiculous to slaughter an entire chicken to eat a chicken breast. started to speculate about how a future could be, because there is this exponential growth towards knowledge and solutions to solve some of the most difficult problems we've got in humanity. So is it easier right now? I think we've got a broader perspective than we did in 1900, 1930. We're in a world where I think we're full of futurists. I think everyone thinks about the future, whether that's just what they're going to eat for dinner in the evening, how they're looking forward to Thanksgiving, or how they're looking forward to their children's wedding in 30 or 40 years. I think that this is sort of a human sort of basic thing. We look to the future because we hope that future is going to be abundant and really, really supportive of a really strong human race.
Yeah, in balance throughout. Check out NikolasBadminton.com. Futurist researcher, keynote speaker, Nikolas Badminton. Always a pleasure, man. Really enjoy doing this. Thank you so much. We'll talk again.